Christian, thank you very much for making the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate this.
Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you at NATO headquarters.
Let's start from the Deputy Secretary General's visit to the region, which is the concentration of our interview today in Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan. What are the biggest takeaways from that visit that you can tell us about?
Her visit to the region is a signal of the importance of the South Caucasus for NATO and its allies. With all the geopolitical turbulence and developments, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, obviously this region and the security and the stability of the region is very, very important for all allies. So her visit is a signal of that. She visited both countries recently in December and in January. I think the main takeaway is that our partnership, which has long-standing over 3 decades now, is as important as ever and as strong as ever. As part of that partnership, we do political dialogue and practical cooperation. She was now spearheading the dialogue part, the consultation, and met with the leadership of both countries and passed the message of, again, the importance of talking to each other, working together, a message of importance of our partnership, a message of importance of the stability, security of Armenia and Azerbaijan for the alliance, and a message of partnership is what she delivered there.
And 2026 seems to be an important year especially for the region and the partnerships, when we're looking at the new framework for the NATO partnership between Armenia. NATO, Armenia, NATO, Azerbaijan partnership. Now, what does that entail? What does that mean?
When it comes to the framework of our partnerships, well, as I just said, it's been in place for quite a long time. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan are part of the Partnership for Peace, the Euro-Atlantic Partnership, and as such have contributed to Euro-Atlantic security already. So the partnership frameworks are in place. What we're working on now is a specific tool. So for each of our partners, we have something called the Individually Tailored Partnership Program. And this is basically a document that brings together the strategic objectives and goals that NATO and the partner in question will want to do together. So it's important, lofty political goals and also very practical things that we will together, from exercises to language courses and so on. So we're working and finalizing these documents with both countries, hopefully soon. And then we have this practical individual document for each partners. But there's so much that we're doing together. We just talked about the visit of the Deputy Secretary General there. A group of ambassadors, NATO ambassadors, visited both Yerevan and Baku last year. We have the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, who has hosted a seminar in Armenia and is planning to host one later in Azerbaijan. Furthermore, we do a lot on the practical side together. Both countries participate in different exercises, and we do training courses together. So there's a lot already happening. I don't want to give the impression that we're expecting for something to start. A lot has been done in the past decades, and it can only grow stronger with these new documents.
I feel that Georgia is missing in this conversation, though. Georgia has been an aspirant country for over 2 decades, or almost 2 decades now. So why is Georgia missing in this conversation between us today?
Well, you haven't asked me about Georgia yet, but now we're talking about Georgia. Indeed, Georgia is the third important partner for NATO. And as you yourself pointed out, it's one of the aspirants for NATO membership. That aspiration is not something that comes from NATO. Of course, as in all countries, that's something that comes from the people of Georgia. And you know that there is a clear support for Euro-Atlantic and European integration. Furthermore, it's laid down in the constitution of Georgia. So that's our guiding principle. And as you said, or as I said, Georgia is a partner. We have a liaison office that's helping to move forward our relationship, our practical cooperation in Tbilisi. We have the substantial NATO-Georgia package, which is in place for over a decade now, whereby NATO experts provide specific support to the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces of Georgia on various areas on defense reforms and military reforms. So the cooperation is ongoing. And then we look at Georgia and the government of Georgia to live up to the demands of the people of Georgia and also to the constitution.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to Armenia and Azerbaijan now. Armenia's shift away from Russia, away from CSTO, is a major, at least in the region, major geopolitical shift. Now, how is NATO addressing that? How is NATO looking at that? And is Armenia getting any additional assistance, or whether it's from the partnership or from any other types of support that NATO could provide Armenia in this process of this transformation?
Thank you. This gives me an opportunity to clarify a bit how NATO partnerships work. Because, in fact, we call it demand-driven. So it's the partner who comes to NATO to want a partnership relationship and support if that is the case. In other words, it's never NATO that's in the business of finding partners, nor members, by the way, despite of what you hear from Russian propaganda, disinformation. NATO is not expanding. It's not hunting members or partners. I myself come from a country that joined in 1999, Hungary, and I can tell you that back in the 90s, NATO was not asking Hungary to join. On the contrary, it was Hungary pushing to join NATO. But back to Armenia, NATO respects the choices of all countries and all nations. So Armenia, as a member of CSTO, had a perfectly good and well-developed partnership with NATO that was never an obstacle to developing the partnership. Hence, the shifts and changes in Armenian foreign policy is something that NATO and NATO allies fully respect. We do not judge that, and we're eager to do more if Armenia so chooses, and it happens to be the case that through our partnership and through this individually tailored partnership program, we can look at further opportunities where we can support defense reforms, modernization of the armed forces, moving to a more Western-styled military from the Soviet inadequate ways of working. So full respect to any choice that Armenia makes. It's not something we ask for. But we're open to do more and do as much as the partner wishes to do, and as long as it also meets the alliance's interest, of course.
So is there any risk that you consider or think about when it comes to the speed of Armenia's partnership development with NATO? Is there anything that's risky in doing it faster or slower?
I do not really see a risk for NATO as such, unless we're unable to fulfill a promise we make. So on our side, we have to make sure that if we agree to do something with a partner, especially if it's in the area of support, defense capacity support, for example, that we're able to resource it and we're able to deliver on that. But if you're alluding to political risk, no. I mean, the strength of the alliance is that everything we do, we decide by consensus. So if we agree among 32 allies to work more with Armenia, then all allies agree, and then there is no risk from our side.
Azerbaijan is maintaining good relations with Russia, both economic, somewhat on the political level as well. How does NATO navigate that, or do you navigate that at all?
Again, I don't feel we need to navigate Azerbaijan's relationship with Russia. It has never been an obstacle for our partnership, and it continues to be something that we respect and accept. Then we work very closely with Azerbaijan on many issues, not least on energy security. It's a very important provider of energy to European countries, especially as we're moving away from Russian sources. We are working in many different areas with Azerbaijan, from scientific cooperation to exercises, education and training. And of course, we don't forget the important support Azerbaijan provided to our operations and missions in Afghanistan, being the last ones at the Kabul airport in 2021. That's not forgotten, the bravery of the Azerbaijani military there.
And when we talk about this region, we of course talk about Russian influence, whether it's through political, economic, energy means, or through hybrid operations. So what is it that NATO does to help them with, especially pushback on hybrid operations, disinformation, and so forth?
So I think all three partners in this region have experience, as do allies, from Russian hybrid operations. Our Secretary General doesn't like the word hybrid because in his view it doesn't really cover what we're talking about, which is sabotage, assassinations even, interference in elections. So very, very serious issues. And if we just call them hybrid, it may sound something fluffy and nice. No, these are really serious actions by Russia, which serve to undermine democracies, interfere in democratic decision-making, and of course, in many cases, stopping the support we are providing to Ukraine. And I think what you've witnessed in allies and in some partner countries as well, that on the contrary, these actions will just firm up the support that we are providing to Ukraine, and hopefully will strengthen our democracies as well. That's why we're looking at strengthening our resilience, and that's something where we can work with partners and share information and experience with experiencing such hybrid attacks from Russia. And of course, there's an important election coming up in Armenia, and we follow very closely the developments there and expect Russian meddling, as is unfortunately customary in democratic processes.
You mentioned Ukraine very briefly. Is there anything that NATO has learned in Ukraine as it comes to the Russian operations that NATO is helping partners in the Caucasus to apply to their systems?
I think Ukraine sadly has a lot of lessons from the battlefield and also from Russian interference that we all can learn from. There are a couple of ways that we are working on these lessons learned and trying to implement them and also keep in mind for allies as well. We have established a joint NATO-Ukraine training and education center in Poland, in Bydgoszcz, that collects these lessons learned and applies them. And then we have the joint analysis and lessons learned center, which is in Portugal. That's a NATO command, where we also collect the lessons learned. But definitely we need to heed the bitter lessons that Ukraine is learning through this savage war of Russia. But one important lesson, I think, is that the Russian military was not as capable, of course, as we all thought. And that's important to keep in mind.
Let's talk about America now, very briefly. 5%, is it coming from the threat from Russia, or is it to entice and engage U.S. in the alliance?
The Hague Summit indeed was historic. It made a historic decision on defense spending. And you mentioned the 5% benchmark, which is, of course, 3.5% of core defense spending and 1.5% of defense-related spending. Think about infrastructure, cyber defenses, and so on. And this was indeed historic. And I think President Trump and the Trump administration deserve credit from bringing this to NATO and for forcing through the importance of burden sharing and for all of us to spend more on defense. Because this is not just a number coming out of the blue. This is something that's defined by threats. And again, I'll go back very bureaucratically, but I'll go back to the strategic concept in 2022 that outlined two key threats for NATO. Of course, Russia as the most immediate threat, but also terrorism. And then we have defense plans in place to defend against these threats. And these defense plans come with concrete capabilities and demands on our armed forces to meet, to deter these threats and defend against them. President Trump and the Trump administration has been very vocal and very clear about the importance of burden sharing for European allies and Canada to carry more of the burden. And I think you've seen that already happening from the Hague summit. As I said, we're at the halfway point, and come Ankara summit in July, we will look at how allies are meeting this commitment that they made in the Hague summit. So 5%, it's a concrete number. It's driven by our threats and our needs to meet those threats. And that's something that has brought the alliance more together. As you said, it was a decision made together at 32, and will only make the alliance stronger.
Then what happens in case in July we discovered that not all NATO members are spending 5%, or not everybody is doing enough to get to the 5%? What happens then? And is there still concern that U.S. may back away from NATO?
First of all, we don't deal with speculation, and we are very optimistic that everybody will meet the commitments that they have made, simply because we see the threats that are in front of us. Then I will say that President Trump and the Trump administration, Secretary Rubio and others have made several times clear their ironclad commitment to NATO, to Article 5. You need just look at the US troop presence in Europe and the commitment, concrete commitments to European security. So this is not something that's a worry. NATO is just becoming stronger with the 5% spending target. And I'm very optimistic that all allies are working towards that.
Are you optimistic about the open door staying open in light of the threats and challenges that we face?
So we've always said that NATO's open door policy has been a historic success. And again, just look at the region and look at those allies that joined after 1999 and the contributions they bring to this alliance. The open door policy is not something we can change. It's written in the Washington Treaty, Article 10. So it's not a question whether it's valid or not. And then let's see whether those countries that aspire to join the alliance can be ready to do the necessary reforms, and when allies are ready to make decisions on enlargement. But the open door is there, and it's a historic success. So again, another reason to be optimistic about the future.